actually feel like if there's any silver lining to get out of this dumpster fire, it's that, especially young people might see a golden statue of Trump and say, oh wait, I saw something like that on The Boys and it was so ridiculous that this is completely ridiculous. And I think there's real value in that kind of satire of just pointing out how silly it all is.
This morning, many of the president's supporters furious, calling this picture that Trump posted appearing to depict himself as Jesus blasphemy.
I'm not worthy. Neither was I.
Have you looked at the news recently? Well, don't. At this point, reading the news is the equivalent of repeatedly hitting yourself in the head with hammers. Not because of the prominence of far-right newscasters, or biased reporting presenting anyone who doesn't think that Muslims and trans people are literal demons from hell as crazed extremists, even though, yeah, that is a problem. Even before we talk about any of that, the news is a reflection of the current state of the world. And even through an extremely biased and cowardly lens, it tells us what the people who write and edit these news stories think that we should be paying attention to on any given day.
J.K. Rowling.
Is she owed an apology or not?
The thing is, these days, the news is indistinguishable from parody. At the time of writing this, the American Department of Justice just declared that their government is forever barred and precluded from looking into Donald Trump's tax returns. This on the back of him suing the government, which he runs, and putting that money back into his own pocket, building a giant golden statue of himself, renaming Palm Beach Airport Donald J. Trump Airport, requiring it only be stocked with his own merchandise, and months of obvious insider trading around Trump's attacks on Iran, using literal human lives to make money through dodgy gambling sites. If you were to write a comically corrupt, stupid, and inept, but extremely dangerous and evil villain, you could do no better than this man. In fact, you probably wouldn't be allowed to write this man at all, because everything he does is so comically stupid, evil, or both, that you would have been laughed out of any writer's room for even suggesting one of the things the Orange Man has done since he got into office the first time in 2016. And certainly since his 2024 election, where he's gotten even more ruthless, bloodthirsty, and off the rails. That is, unless you were one of the writers of The Boys, a show which revels in the absurdity of evil and having its villains perform that absurdity, even as it follows, sometimes beat for beat, the actions of the United States and the increasingly bizarre actions of the actual non-parody President of the United States.
Everyone remain calm. You're all very special people. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
In doing this, however, focusing on mainly satirizing one figure as the show has progressed, the more fundamental issues of the United States, the military-industrial complex, the corporate oligarchy, the way the government protects the rich while they do unspeakable things to American citizens and those abroad, and how American capitalism is inseparable from its horrifying crimes overseas, have taken a back seat where they were once prominent or even faded completely.
Because your soldiers will only be super temporarily. The product, finally perfected.
When there are a million awful things happening every day, it is hard to catch everything, but even so, is it worth it to deconstruct the image of one man and his regime if it means de-emphasizing the conditions that led to his rise and allowed him to become the tyrant that he now so clearly is?
I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
I'm Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for actual parody newspaper The Daily Telegraph, the only newspaper in Britain that is actually labelled as satire, despite how absurd and deranged all the actual real British newspapers are. Unlike our humble newspaper, the genre of satire is practically as old as writing itself. prose written to highlight and expose the shortcomings and sins of the world around the writer, for the purpose of communicating the need for improvement, change, or the overturning of a system altogether, is found as far back as the 2nd millennium BC in ancient Egypt. The Satire of the Trades is a contender for the title of oldest surviving work of satire, but while thousands of years ago you could write the equivalent of the thick of it if it was written about the ancient Egyptian scribe class on ancient papyrus, today the scribe class is a lot less relevant than it was under the reign of Egypt's 19th dynasty. Instead, we have a world filled with idiots like this.
I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? He's got a very person who I've known for a long time. Nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen. Autism, how about that? Autism tomorrow.
And how the hell are we supposed to satirize that without just repeating what these people are saying and looking at the camera like, get a load of this guy?
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. I said, no, they're not humans. They're not humans. They're animals.
And if we were to successfully parody this current world, would people even be able to tell? Or would the sheer absurdity of the current world order render any work of satire indistinguishable from reality? Poe's law is an internet-born adage that states that any satire or parody of extremist views can and will be, at least by some people, mistaken for a sincere statement of extremist views. It gets its name from Nathan Poe, an alias for someone posting on creationist forums in 2005. According to Wired magazine, Poe was part of a discussion about how hard it was to tell whether people making their awful arguments against evolution were real or pulling every other user's leg. In response, Poe posted, "Poe's law. Without a winking smiley or other blatant displays of humour, it is utterly impossible to parody a creationist in such a way that someone wouldn't mistake them for the genuine article."
Behold, the atheist's nightmare. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one for the other.
When you see someone online talking about flat Earth or once upon a time liking Hitler, back when that was a rare thing to see, without a clear indicator of the intent of the statement's author, it can be difficult to discern whether you're listening to a joke or a profession of the author's dedication to some of the wackiest or most evil beliefs known to man. Even when it might seem obvious to you which is which, there will be people who do not see the indicators that you see, and presume that, say, Nick Fuentes doesn't actually like Adolf Hitler. Thing is, this works much more as a piece of internet wisdom when extremist views are uncommon, or at least widely derided. How do you even start to parody the far right properly now? They're everywhere, they're normalised, and when these views are normalised, just stating them outright, even in absurdity, doesn't come across as a joke at all sometimes. You just sound serious. At most, you'll just sound serious and stupid. When you log on to Twitter and see people praising Hitler, there's no Poe's law about it. You are likely looking at an honest-to-God Nazi, though it helps that these people usually have Nazi iconography in their names and banners too, and that a lot of these accounts are bots, and bots don't have any intent of their own, only preset instructions. But you can satirise these accounts in other ways, phrasing things in a way that these people or these robots would never say them, playing with their verbiage to say something entirely different, replacing words or phrases to change the meaning. Satire in the age of the internet was already tricky, but it adapted. In the age of a world beyond parody, can it adapt once again? It certainly tried, but has it succeeded? I would argue that it's starting to, but it's having a few stumbling blocks along the way. Even now, when it's getting harder and harder to tell if there's even a human being behind the account you're poking at, people do, by and large, a pretty good job at wringing some humour out of them. Speaking of robots...
Did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was Me, I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor. It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
In April of this year, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, posted a picture of himself as Jesus Christ. This AI-generated act of obvious blasphemy, posted by the most powerful man on Earth, portrayed the president as he was before his face melted, appearing to heal a sick man in a hospital bed with Skyrim-style restoration magic, surrounded by nurses, praying women, armed forces, American flags, and bald eagles. Above him, badly rendered soldiers ascend into heaven, floating past a Washington DC that also has the Statue of Liberty for some reason, and fighter jets that look so off that one appears to be a TIE fighter. In the middle of the glowing yellow soldiers is some kind of bizarre demon, winged, with a three-pronged head, holding the hand of a soldier and watching Trump as Christ from the skies. Fireworks explode in the skies, presumably causing a massive safety hazard for these demons, soldiers, and eagles alike. This picture raised many questions. Questions such as, how whipped are American Christians that they will look at something like this and not immediately hate the president's guts? And wait, is that soldier watching Trump cast lay on hands Charlie Kirk? This image was posted just hours after Trump posted a long and incoherent rant, full of rage at our Chicago town Pope, Leo XIV, for doing what popes are supposed to do when criticising Trump and Israel's actions in Iran. Later on, after the image was deleted, Trump claimed he thought the photo was meant to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better. Regardless of this obvious lie, he did remove the post, claiming he didn't want to have anyone confused. People were confused. They were so confused. While this was one of the rare instances where conservative Christians in America did mildly criticise Trump, the criticism could have been much worse. Expressions of disappointment, a bit of sadness. If a Democrat president had done this, these same people would probably have been calling for the poster to be executed. But I'm not here to talk about how weird this post was and how people reacted to it. I'm here to talk about how the absurdity of our current moment, the increasing rates at which reality appears to be beyond parody, is making media that attempts to critique the world and satirize it feel very uncanny indeed. You see, just 48 hours before Trump posted the now infamous image of himself as Jesus, satirical television superhero show The Boys aired an episode in which the stand-in for Trump, Bush, and the worst aspects of America, a textual child of the military-industrial complex wearing a literal American flag, Homelander, declares that he is God.
Real American values who can conquer evil once and for all.
I'm not worthy.
Neither was I.
The Boys is an American anti-superhero show made for Amazon Prime, as one of those shows that Jeff Bezos likes to fund sometimes, even though they clearly mark him as an enemy of all that is good and holy. Its showrunner is Eric Kripke off of Supernatural, and it's based off the truly horrible comic book series The Boys by Garth Ennis, a bad comic that I don't think you should read. You can read it, it has its moments, but probably not. It follows a team of heroic vigilantes of morally dubious backgrounds as they attempt to take on the world's superheroes, who are a very clear stand-in for everything that is wrong with America. They are most obviously the military-industrial complex, but on the side they are also Hollywood, the FBI and the CIA, Big Pharma, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, when necessary. The show, fronted by Jack Quaid and Carl Urban, two of The Boys, has, since the very start, been building up to a final confrontation with Homelander, the said representation of all that's wrong with America. And a petulant man-child with more power than anyone else on Earth, but who is deeply insecure, pathetic, and has done pretty much every bad thing you can imagine. Oh, and he literally wears the American flag as a cape, as I might have mentioned. It's quite on the nose. The whole thing is on the nose. The whole point is sort of it being on the nose.
No God. The only man in the sky is me.
They have assumed terrorist.
Copyright infringement is costing Vought $1.2 billion per year. That's money out of our pockets.
Heinrich Himmler. He was a lovely dancer. And that's Goebbels. The other races are grinding us down and taking what is rightfully ours.
While it is very blunt with its metaphor, and it is possibly the least subtle and loudest satire you could imagine in live action, this makes for some truly great moments. Just for one example, Homelander, the symbol of a corrupt and violent America's relationship with literal Nazi Stormfront, and how she sees him as the triumph of her ideology. It's not subtle, but it's kind of spitting. Of course, there are some things that it does not critique, which become more glaringly obvious the more time since October 2023 passes. And when you look back on how it portrays Muslims with this in mind, and with the background of the actor who plays Frenchie in it, that's pretty worrying. And this does prevent it from properly satirizing everything it would need to do, even if it's just parodying Trump. But I'm not really here to talk about that. You see, when you are watching this video, The Boys, the TV show, will be over. And while it's been getting a lot of hate this season, this isn't a review. This is a video about satire in a world beyond parody, and The Boys' place in this. It's about how we wrestle with trying to make pointed humour at a world of blunt force.
Fuck you, fascist!
Yeah! All right.
In the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, Karl Marx, on the subject of the coup in which Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, President of France's Second Republic, became Emperor Napoleon III of the Second French Empire, wrote, comparing Napoleon to his more famous uncle Napoleon, "The philosopher Hegel remarks somewhere that all great world historic facts and personages appear, so to speak, twice. He forgot to add, the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce." While tragedy is hard to deal with, a struggle to process, when tragedy is made into or used for satire, there is less of a question about whether the most absurd elements of a satire made to exaggerate the actions of people and systems being critiqued will be granted the gift of prophecy and become startlingly real. Tragedies are by their nature solemn. Farce, however, well, farce is already a type of comedy. Farce and satire are sisters. Satire likes to think itself smarter, but sometimes a farce is just as biting. And to satirize what is already farce, a satire has to, in a way, itself become farce. Such is the case with The Boys. If a farce is a comedy relying on exaggerated and ridiculous situations, slapstick and improbable scenarios, is The Boys not a farce? A farce can be satire too, but there are satires which do not, for example, feature men shrinking to the size of a flea so that they can jump inside and rub someone's urethra. But with the real world being what it is right now, the only way The Boys could even start to satirize our present moment would be by becoming farce. The world is farce. A satire of the world that considers itself above farce cannot effectively satirize the absolutely ridiculous situation we find ourselves in. A satire that considers itself too highbrow and too smart to engage in blue humour or incredibly on the nose and over-the-top metaphor and themes might struggle to satirize a world in which Trump tweets out himself as Jesus or has a golden statue made of himself to be worshipped. The farce of our current world. Whereas a highbrow show would be able to effectively criticise the real tragedies of his presidencies better. War, ICE kidnappings, the G-word he's aiding and abetting. The thing is, though, that only captures how awful things are. To capture not just how awful things are, but how mind-blowingly dumb everything is now, you need a little bit of farce.
They always look like Granddad's bollocks. I'll buy you a nice big family-sized bottle of top-shelf lube, and I'll tickle your balls till your big meters stop.
When I think of that Marx quote, I think of our current wave of global fascism as opposed to the 1930s, given, well, everything, and given how much the Hitler to Trump comparison fits the tragedy and farce comparison in my head, at least. Some of you will no doubt be taken to the comments to disagree. I often think about how satire works in the age of Donald Trump, about how it's possible to satirize a world that is simultaneously so horrifying and so mind-numbingly stupid. And whenever I do, I think of the fact that there were people satirizing Adolf Hitler back in the 1930s, even with the world and that regime at its most as tragedy. Our history demands to be satirized, and it would be hard to argue that Charlie Chaplin or hell, Donald Duck weren't just as goofy and as obviously pointed or as comically on the nose as the boys, even if they didn't also have to deal with the implications of having a former IDF soldier on the cast.
Hi, I'm Tomer Capon. Thousands of Israeli families are struggling now more than ever.
And no matter how tragic or how farcical history gets, there will be satire, and it might only get more tragic and more farcical from here. After all, we reached the tragedies of the 1930s because of the mistakes of the decades before, of runaway capitalism that plunged the world into a Great Depression, of pointless war and its consequences, sending millions of common people to their graves to solve the petty squabbles of the rich, of millions in poverty crying out for an alternative, and the fear those above them felt at the possibility that they might organise and win, especially after 1917 happened in Russia, and what the rich were willing to do to stop that happening. That was tragedy. This is farce.
Transgender for everybody transgender. He gets up there and he tries to imitate my dance a little bit. Nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen. But with Tylenol, don't take it. Don't take it. And if you can't live, if your fever is so bad, you have to take one because there's no alternative to that.
The incident with the Trump as Jesus image was not the first time that the boys' satire had been outpaced by current events, and it wouldn't be the last. In fact, a week before the Boys Season 4 finale featuring an assassination attempt on the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump was holding a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when this happened.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Other events were more predictable. For example, Firecracker's dismissal mirroring that of Pam Bondi and Kirsty Noem. While these firings were some of the first of Trump's second term, his first term was rife with firings, and very few people around him lasted long enough to become the household names that, unfortunately for us all, alcoholic crusade larper Pete Hegseth or genuine Nazi Stephen Miller have become. The Boys showrunner Eric Kripke said about these firings, "It's all so predictable. When we wrote it 2 years ago, we were like, this is for sure what's going to happen to every single person in Trump's orbit. He just demands everyone sacrifice everything they hold dear, every value they've ever had, and then he kicks them out. So that was the least surprising surprise ever." But as much as he tried to mirror current events and succeeded in this case, in the case of the Trump Jesus image and even more besides, he was absolutely trying to go for something absurd, something that would never happen. Then it did. It became real. You could chalk this down to the Boys' flavour of satire just being too close to reality, but one of the things that makes the Boys is that it is sometimes painfully on the nose. One of the big critiques I heard a lot about the show was that it was absurd with its parody, that it's so over the top that it fails in any way to be subtle, and that's true. The Boys is not a subtle show, it is the opposite. And the way it handles satire is through shouting it through a megaphone rather than letting you connect the dots. It doesn't hold your hand, it shoves you. It wears its themes on its chest, makes its points very bluntly, and yet, even with that in mind, there were still hundreds of right-wingers that seemed to miss the fact that the obvious what if Superman was evil character, Homelander, was a villain for years, and are now just crashing out over the idea that these characters' actions could ever be considered villainous. Bear in mind, if you can think of an unforgivable act, this character has absolutely done it.
Leftists trying to design a villain character. Let's have him pass a law that would make babies healthier. Leftists, we put him in an American flag, but made him do bad stuff because we are edgy and fresh.
Remove the ridiculous things made to purposely make him dislikable, and it's just a regular guy who wants regular things. You people pretending not to understand is the reason we can't have discourse.
And then this guy goes and says Hitler did nothing wrong. Normal. Speaking of normal, here's Elon Musk.
I didn't watch the show, to be honest. Here's the second best review.
Kripke probably got flack from his wife's BF for Homelander being used in based memes, and had to write the ending as a grovelling apology. I'm not upset, just remarking that the ending sounds fake and gay. People with the media literacy of a naked mole rat aside, however, upon seeing the AI-generated picture of Trump as Christ, Kripke told Polygon, "I am really tired and weary of the world reflecting the show before we get a chance to do it. I appreciate the marketing, I'm just like, can you just please give us a chance to put some absurd satire out there before you prove that it's more realistic than we ever intended? This is the episode where Homelander decides he's going to be God, and 48 hours before it, Trump releases an image of himself as God." It should be noted that the final season of The Boys was written before the last presidential election, where there was still a chance Trump would not get his second term, and maybe the world would be a much less dark place, but probably not that much less dark, let's be real. Speaking about the plan for the season, Kripke said, "It sounds super naive now, but I swear the plan was, let's write a 1984 version of what creeping authoritarianism looks like in America, and maybe everyone will be like, whew, we really dodged a bullet. But instead we got hit with the bullet." And the parallels keep on coming. You might have seen recently the story of the golden statue of Trump that was just built in Florida, and while most of us, seeing the supposed religious rite literally building and worshipping a golden idol in place of their god, will have been struck by just how on-the-nose reality has become, and how a world that has become such a parody of the corruption and hypocrisy at the heart of America seems impossible to satirize, Eric Kripke saw this moment of the golden statue of Homelander being built for similar reasons, to which he pretty understandably just said, "Seriously, what the fuck?" Going back, however, to what Kripke said re Trump as Jesus. A month ago, when we were talking about the marketing, I was like, Homelander saying he's God is so out there. We have to be careful about how we even introduce the idea to the public, because they'll say he's gone too far, and here we are. It's just really hard to out-satire this world. And that's the point we're getting at in this video. In a world where the news manages to out-absurd itself every single day, in a world where reality appears to constantly be jumping the shark, what is even the point of satire? I have a gut feeling, perhaps as a result of growing up on satire of varying quality and almost all smug and British, that satire is a necessity in the face of evil. And yet, the most obviously evil something is, the more bombastic and unsubtle the horrors around us, the less room satire seems to have to maneuver. Satire is, after all, political or social condemnation framed as humour or dramatization. It is one thing to make, say, cautionary tales around an issue, but when they are focused on specifics of the actions of a figure or regime, they become incredibly preachy and unsubtle and lose a lot of their edge. The line between allegory and satire can sometimes be quite thin, but maybe this is a difference of approach. The ability of one to satirize something truly horrible, getting back to the topic at hand, seems to me to work better with distance. For example, Jojo Rabbit, 80 years or so after Hitler's reign of terror, using his image for humour in a way that conveys a sincere political message can be done. But satirising Hitler isn't just a present phenomenon, often pointing a finger at a certain president of the United States. During World War II, Disney was making Donald Duck propaganda films, ripping into the guy who was, at this time, ordering some of the worst crimes ever committed in the history of the human race. And though it had an effect, and there were other works besides, no satire of Hitler is as iconic or as admired as Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. A nation of blue-eyed blondes.
Why not a blonde Europe, a blonde Asia, a blonde America?
We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. Blonde world.
And a brunette dictator.
Dictator of the world.
Why not?
The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Beautiful blonde Aryans.
They will love you, they will adore you.
Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world. Millions of despairing men, women, and little children. victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
They will worship you as a god.
No, you mustn't say it. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people, and so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
Released in 1940, The Great Dictator was Charlie Chaplin's first true sound film and was written, directed, produced by, and acted in by the silent movie star. A black satire film that condemns Hitler, Mussolini, their ideology and their bigotry, in which Chaplin played both a fascist dictator and a Jewish barber. Chaplin was firing on all cylinders in an attempt to communicate the horrors happening in Germany long before he even knew the true extent of those horrors. In fact, despite its accolades and critical acclaim, Chaplin in 1964 proclaimed that had he known the entire truth about what was happening in Germany at that time, he would not have been able to make the film. Even as the movie stands, one of its most iconic moments essentially transforms the film from a comedy into a speech condemning fascism and Nazi Germany in particular. As much as he tried and succeeded to satirize the most evil man on the planet, it was not enough. It didn't say everything it needed to say. He had to stop and say something, sincerely, clearly, breaking free of the medium of satire altogether to issue a plea to his audience, to abandon the constraints of the genre. Because in the face of true horror, laughter is not enough.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. Don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty. You, the people, have the power. Let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance.
The Boys does not have a fourth wall break speech to camera denouncing Donald Trump. Most of us would think it doesn't need to, because most of us aren't like the weird right-wingers still spouting online about how Homelander is the hero and calling him their goat. But The Great Dictator's closing speech is a work of persuasion. The Boys assumes you already know that Trump is bad, and as far as they're concerned, that's the end of that. But you'll notice something about that speech from The Great Dictator. It's not just a call-out against fascist demagogues, and Hitler in particular, it's a call to action. A call for solidarity, and for a fight against those who would crush innocents under their boot. And as much as I assume Eric Kripke and the other writers of The Boys probably think their show alludes to that, it doesn't really, like at all. In the earlier seasons of The Boys, the focus is less on Homelander in particular and on Vought International, the superhero company and stand-in for the military-industrial complex as a whole, and the incestuous relationship between the violence of the American state and private capital. Homelander is but the most obvious and dangerous symptom. Towards the end of the show, however, The Boys becomes focused less on taking down Vought and the system it represents and props up, and more on simply taking down Homelander. I don't want to spoil the end of the show here, but when Homelander is gone, the show is basically over. No dismantling of the system, no call to action, no message of brotherhood and unity in the face of such horrors. In fact, the systems that perpetuate the horrors of the show, the creators of the villains of the show that aren't named characters, they persist. There is a new status quo, but it's not really a new status quo at all. All the same problems remain, just one of the symptoms is gone. Unfortunately, this makes me think about Harry Potter. I know, but it's relevant. Because Harry Potter was written by a right-winger who thought she was a liberal, who turned out to be a massive bigot, and who wrote a story in which the arch-villain is a wizard supremacist, in which a whole passage is dedicated to discussing how the mistakes of wizards in subjugating other magical races led to Voldemort's rise. And yet, when Voldemort is defeated, nothing changes. None of the other races are liberated. The other races do not get rights. The goblins are still confined to the banking system anti-Semitically. The house elves are kept in slavery. And yet the book ends with the words, "All was well." Well, they weren't well if you're a fucking elf, were they? And though The Boys is much better at critiquing power, that's a low bar, by having characters have their happy ending while the world stays completely fucked, Well, it tells you something about the ideology of the people behind the show. And that's not to say you can't write a show where the heroes don't succeed in changing the world, but that the way that you tell that story is going to impact how, or even if, your satire lands, and what people are supposed to take away from it.
Come on, you don't want me to bomb you like I did Iraq. Iraq, what the hell's the difference? Relax, guy.
Take South Park, for example. The recent season of South Park was almost wall-to-wall critique of the Trump administration, with the real horrors of the people in charge plainly stated, but exaggerated using the Looney Tunes logic of cartoons, like, Trump makes Satan get an abortion. This obviously didn't happen, but it's sort of what makes it stabbing at Trump work a little better than The Boys. Despite how much The Boys revels in over-the-top debauchery and gore, it, by the end, kind of holds back. South Park obviously does not, but South Park's anti-Trump season doesn't end with Trump losing. And The Boys' Trump allegory does lose, and yet, in some respects, the structures that were the villains of The Boys, at least some of them, kind of get away with it. There are some pretty clear reasons The Boys felt the need to hold back, however, and yet despite Trump losing or winning in these two different satire shows, the state of the world is basically the same at the end. And in a way, South Park's is less disappointing because it doesn't pretend that everything would just be fixed if this guy is gone, despite everything they've built towards. There are some pretty clear reasons The Boys felt the need to hold back, however, some pretty glaring ones. You see, one of the things that, love it or hate it, South Park manages to do is not having to pull punches. The show is an institution, their contracts are tight, and they rake in loads of money. Also, they tended to punch in the direction that networks and capital like. The creators were, after all, at least up until recently, pretty openly right libertarian, and have made some big swings and misses, with some really cruel episodes about trans people, for example, or their climate change denial. The Boys is not at that level, and despite the anti-establishment lens it had in at least the early seasons, it aired on Amazon Prime.
You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you. So you can't connect those two things, not logically.
When you can only air your show due to the good graces of Jeff Bezos, the on and off again richest person in the world, currently off, there are going to be limits on how biting a critique of capitalism you can make before you get cut off. Especially when you're one of the biggest shows on the service. And Jeff Bezos right now is pretty concerned about getting guillotined by the looks of it. He's currently doing press interviews advocating for getting rid of taxes for the lowest paid workers, many of whom work for Amazon under awful conditions and are the only reason he makes any money. And he's begging people not to tax him more, insisting that taxing him, someone who's hoarded the wealth of millions while millions starve, will not help anyone.
What's really causing high rent is government intervention.
Of course, there's also the possibility he's having all these conversations about taxes to distract from the fact that he's not paid millions in tax worldwide, but also in his home country. Is it going to be harder to find out about this ongoing scandal after these interviews where Jeff Bezos' tax is getting SEO optimized through a barrage of public appearances to not feature any of the actual scandals? And I do wonder if this is part of the reason why the show went from a biting critique of everything that's wrong with the USA to focusing on ripping into Trump. Trump is obviously well worth ripping into, but he's a symptom, not the cause of the rot. In fact, there has been pushback from, for example, Homelander's actor in the attempt to make him and Trump less and more detached satire and more one-to-one parallels. Starter and minors among those lines have helped push the show to stay focused on Homelander's decidedly non-Trumpian characteristics, like the fact that he was raised entirely unloved and parentless in a laboratory, which we learn about in a gruesome revenge-laden return to that setting in Season 4. "I'll give Ant credit," says Kripke. "He'll speak up and he'll say, 'Eric, they are different people.' It's easy to fall into a Saturday Night Live trap of being parody, but I actually owe the psychological truth of the character first and foremost." One of the other restrictions is the spin-off shows for the franchise. Season 5 had to dedicate time to setting up a spin-off about Soldier Boy, Homelander's father, and someone that was, at first, an examination of the violence and bigotry of America's past, but Now he has his own show. They have to fiddle with that in ways that make the satire less effective. And who was even asking for the spin-off? Who wanted this? Especially who would have wanted this if it meant taking away from the conclusion to the entire main series it's spinning off from. But Amazon wanted more The Boys money, so here it is, here's the Soldier Boy show. And then we have possibly another big reason why The Boys narrowed its scope, and a place in which The Boys truly failed to critique the particular moment, and as a result, partially even the Trump administration as a whole, despite how much it tried and focused in on it. And that is the apartheid state in the room. So let's talk about Frenchie.
When you spoke in the past about your military service, you broke down the concept of the most moral army in the world. I just hear that we are a moral army, and it makes me angry because I think we are the most moral there is. The most wonderful people in the country were there in the IDF and are there now. The army is not an easy thing, it's very tough, everyone has their own experiences. I'm not afraid to talk about it, and yes, my chest swells with pride when I talk about the army.
The character of Frenchie is played by Israeli actor Tomer Capone, a former IDF soldier and squadron leader who got the role because showrunner Eric Kripke's mother saw him in something she was watching and thought he seemed like a nice boy. You might be able to guess from his former line of work that he is not, or at least he didn't used to be. Instead, in a 2016 interview with Ynet, he described what he did in the army, and, well, it does make you wonder why a show that was so willing early on to wrestle with the dark heart of America has been unwilling to turn the same eye to the junior partner in the US's current bloody campaign, and one that, with America's weapons, permission, and aid, has leveled city after city, civilian after civilian, without remorse. It's the middle of the night. You enter a family's house. You're not aggressive, but the family doesn't let you get their 18-year-old daughter out easily, and a fight starts. Pushing, cursing, and we tear her apart and drive off. We arrive. We take her out of the car. She's handcuffed, and I grab her by the arm and she doesn't struggle. But she lets go of my grip, signaling me to give her a hand more gently. Her eyes are of course covered in flannel. I bring her into the room, put her in and see 8 other girls inside who look more or less the same. After that, you serve in Nablus and stand at the Huara checkpoint, not letting her father pass with a daughter who is sick and needs to get to the hospital because they announced not to let anyone pass. The next day, someone is arrested and a weapon is found in his drawer. You and your friends attack him, you beat him up. The next day, we went into a week-long operation inside the Nablus Kasbah, and I'm the commander. Children threw stones at us, and there were disturbances, and my friend fired a bullet. Pressure, chaos, and lots of moments of disruption, of pranks at the checkpoints, impatience, the most banal stories. Someone is transporting fruit, so you disassemble the entire truck and open all the watermelons for him, make jokes, or take him a bag of fruit without him even knowing and tell him, "Come on, drive," just because you've been there for hours and you feel like dying. So, a guy who casually talks about kidnapping civilians, talks about his friends firing at children like it's nothing, not exactly the picture of morality. And from his social media activity, it looks like people critiquing Israel the way the boys, at least early on, critiqued the USA, really bothered him. But they never really got to that point of the show. They never even started. I get that there is only so much you can cover, but if you're critiquing the military-industrial complex, US imperialism, and the Trump administrations, it's quite a glaring omission to leave out one of the worst crimes of the last few years, and one that coincides so well with the themes of the show and the usual targets of the show's satirical lens. In that way, The Boys does fall short as satire, despite how strong it can be at times. Not because it focuses too much on Trump, well, a little bit, but because it pulls its punches. It pulls them on Israel. It pulls them on the billionaire that owns their franchise. It retreated from its much more biting critique of the rich and powerful and America as a whole early on. But a lot of the time it does still work. I, as you might be able to tell, have mixed feelings on if The Boys manages to actually satirize this world beyond parody, or if anyone can. I think they can. I think The Boys sometimes did. I'm not sure in the end it entirely succeeded. For all its flaws, I actually think South Park did an okay job. And weirdly, I think a lot of that is because they didn't try to have a happy ending. Because, to the creators of South Park, what would a good ending even look like? For the boys, well, you can be the judge, but from what I can tell, especially from the ways the boys succeeded so well in the early seasons, I'll put it like this. The boys recognizes that the system is broken. It even diagnoses how the system is broken, who benefits, how they benefit, and why. It knows exactly where the rot at the heart of the current system is, and yet, for all that, it cannot prescribe a cure. It cannot conceive of a world where the rot is excised and the broken structures are dismantled. For as much as it sees the world falling apart, it cannot abide what would be needed to be done to fix it. Or at least, if it does, it will not air it. But if we're going to get out of this world beyond parody alive, we're going to need to be able to point towards and to build an alternative. This is something satire cannot achieve. Critiquing power is one thing. Taking action is another. And satire, as much as it can be satisfying, is rarely, if ever, praxis. We should be aiming to build a world where satire such as this is not necessary, where we don't have to reckon with powerful, arrogant men threatening to set the entire world on fire if they don't get their way, where there is no military-industrial complex that incentivizes endless horrors to line the pockets of the super-rich. The great dictator had to break out of its satirical framing to call to action, and I understand why completely. Because while satire can highlight and even spread awareness of a problem, you need to be sincere to show the world what is to be done. Thanks for watching. Hey, thank you for watching this video all to the end. This was longer than I imagined it was when I wrote it. Oh well, that's how long it is. If you liked it despite that, or because of it, I don't know what you like. Why not like it, leave a comment, subscribe, give it a big hype it up, tell all your friends about it, and give me lots of money as thanks for making this ridiculously long video about the boys, and also not about the boys. I imagine some people can be annoyed how much I talk about just satire in general, not just the boys, but, you know... This is how my brain works. This is how I have to live in this. You don't have to live in it. You only have to live in it for once a week or whatever. So you can give me money on Coffee or PayPal, links below as always, or sign to my Patreon and YouTube memberships where you get early videos, uncensored videos, access to the members only Discord, -100 friend code, exclusive content, and all good stuff. And you get your name read out at the end of each video, just like Dan-shaped blob, Caddick, Achoo, Graffitia, Ekachu, Jonah Fart 2, Kath, read this fart noise out. Uncast Shadow of a Southern Myth, Rain, Michael McGrawty, Will, Alexandra Barnes, ReeseNet, Ken Sorden, Andrew Steele, Georgie, Carlita Del Mazzotti, Anna Nicholson, Dungeon Slime, Naomi Gorman, Melody, Ben Norman, Brooke Linnett, Heidi Law, Transform and Function, Cara Patching, Matty98, Leather Dawn, Spin Noir, Victor Lufgren, Gilda Dragon, A Slice of Cake, Rue, Buried Elk, Ewan Bennett, Mouty, Angina Service, You Are Made of Stupid, Tomo, Melissa Jackson, Brendan Pruzio Your Stuff, Minstrel of Course, Jeffrey on, Tom the Not So Quite, I'll start that again, Tom the Not Quite So Brave as Sir Lancelot, well that's why I shouldn't do that one quickly, Elefar, Trequoy, Ariella, Proquire, Robin Thomas, Emily Eisenberg, Garlic Escape, Kira B, No Sparkling Heart, Corey, Joanna J, Mighty the Sword, Carol in Imogen Q, Luciana Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, those are two different names, Endo 191, Cav, Quesadilla de Tortilla Azul, Leron, Adam Lees, Daniel Nevels, Not Paul, MB, Wandering Wonder, Lex Phoenix, Entered Curzitz, Mira DJ, Senior Boa Ear, James W. Thorngill, Deborah Laboon, Zilla Athenaeum, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lisette, Jay, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helen Ariel, Sierra Whiskey, Ali Hatgill, John N, Lily Lloyd, Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Raven Tempest, Shield Daden, Robin Podolsky, Nightlight Pleasure Jesus, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Sarah Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexander Lilly, Howard Lott, Robert McCallan, Sabrina Wade, Montana Schmidbauer, Zach Beavan, Meow Miaski, Kamui, Eva Kebab, Marty Hunt, Jane Luciferian, Melissa Allen, Atarax Builds Things, Sarah Francesca Smith. Thank you all so much. I will see you soon for not satire. Maybe it'll be satire. Ooh, we'll see how much fun I make about RuPaul next week. Is that satire? We'll find out. I don't know what else to say. Goodbye.